Hi, grade 11. Welcome back to Unit 2, Facing Life's Obstacles. And our focus for today is Reading 1. Exactly. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the picture. What is it that you can see here in the picture? What sport is it that they're playing? They're playing basketball. But what is unique about these guys playing the game? Exactly. They're all in wheelchairs. These are kids, young boys playing basketball, but if you notice it, they either do not have legs or their legs do not function, so they can't even walk. They're using wheelchairs, but still playing the game. That is amazing. And that brings us back to the topic of obstacles. Life's obstacles, the things that we face in life that make us unable to do certain things. But the question is, do you give up or do you give in, or do you go on and pursue what you like? Now, as we look at number one, here we can see there are many different kinds of obstacles. We can have physical obstacles, so that is our body, economic, it can be anything. Okay, so what are some other examples of the kinds of obstacles that people face other than physical or economic? Please write that down. Number two, what are some ways that people overcome their obstacles? How have maybe you ever overcome an obstacle in your life? And number three, what obstacles have you faced in your life and how have you tried to overcome them? Please write down your ideas on that so in our next meeting we are able to discuss that. Cool. Let's focus on reading one, The Education of Frank McCourt. Now, as always, we go to the vocabulary first. We're going to look at the vocabulary as the meaning of the word, the definitions, and also how the word is used in context, and how we can figure out what the meaning is of the word in context. And then saying context, I mean to say all the text that comes before the bold-faced words and the text that comes after the bold-faced word. That is context. Sometimes we do not have to look a word up in a dictionary or online. Sometimes by just looking at the context, we can already figure out what the word means. We're going to look at abandonment, meager, misery, yearn for, tormented, dilapidated, poverty, hopelessness, shame, sordid, and defeated. Okay, those are the words that we will be looking at. Okay, what I would like you to do is I want you to read this passage and try to understand what the words mean just from the context. Now, if for example you would need the Bahasa Indonesia for it, you can just write it above the word. You can pause the video and read the text. Go ahead. Great, that brings us to activity 2. I'd like you to answer the questions. Number 1, Frank had a hard life growing up. What were some of the obstacles or challenges he had to overcome? Did you get that out of that short text? Number 2, what did Frank enjoy doing as a child? And number 3, why did Frank reinvent his past when he came to America? I want you to answer these questions. Now, before you do that, you have to annotate. So circle, underline, highlight the keywords in every question, and then go back to the text and scan it. Now, that brings us to another reading strategy. So we've already discussed previewing. As you know, in previewing, we always look at finding the type of text, knowing what the type of text is and what the purpose is for the text. And we do that by reading the title and the headings. And we annotate the keywords in that. We also look at the visuals. And from there, we can make a prediction of what type of text it is and what purpose it has. And that gives us focus to read. Now, what I want you to do right now is I want you to scan. I want you to annotate the questions on the keywords, and then scan through the text to find the location where you locate that particular keyword. So basically you're not reading it again, but you're just looking over it, kind of looking for the keyword that you underlined in the question. Now you might not find the exact same word because they paraphrase it, but that is similar in meaning. So you just go scan through it, look through it, and ta-da, there I find the place. Then you read, let's say, the whole paragraph to understand what it means, and you will be able to answer. Okay, pause your video and answer questions 1 to 3. Awesome. That brings us to activity 3. So we're still on the vocab, guys. Find the bold-faced words in the reading passage. So you flip back the page before it. Look at the bold-faced words. Now, how are they connected with the synonym that is placed here? So, for instance, sadness would be misery. And I'd like you to fill it out. Number 2 up to 11, find the right word with the correct synonym. Pause your video. Well done. Okay, there we are. We are at previewing right now. So that is the start of our reading section. We're not yet jumping into the text. We never do that. We will always have a prep first before we start reading. And the first 2 steps that we will take are previewing and skimming. Now, so previewing, let's do it together. Let's look at the text. Let's look at the headings and also the title. There are no headings in this text, only a title, and we have one visual. The education of Frank McCourt. The keywords we find in this title is education, and in the name, of course, Frank McCourt. So it's probably about his education. And we see here the picture of the man. Serious man. So basically, as we look at it, it looks like an article and it's informative, right? Articles often also have subheadings. This one apparently doesn't have it though. Yeah. Okay, so read the first 2 paragraphs of the education of Frank McCourt and then answer the questions. So we have 3 questions. Where is Frank McCourt now? 2, what do you think he means by they gave me so much more than I gave them? And number 3, what do you think happened to Frank between 1949 and 1997? Okay, pause your video and read only paragraph 1 and 2 to be able to answer those questions. So this is 1 paragraph and this is the 2nd paragraph, only 1 and 2. They're already numbered, so that is awesome. Go ahead, pause your video and answer the 3 questions. Cool, that brings us to the 2nd reading strategy, which is skimming. When we skim, we're looking for the main idea of the text. So basically, when we skim, we read the introductory paragraph, which is the first paragraph, and then we read the first sentence of every body paragraph, which is called the topic sentence, and we read the last paragraph of the text. Well, there's 1 more page. Here we go. And that would be the concluding paragraph, which that is not yet the concluding paragraph. Boy, this is long. This is the concluding paragraph, paragraph 37. And this kind of ends the whole text and wraps it up. Okay, cool. So what you're doing is you read the introductory paragraph, you read the topic sentence of each body paragraph, and you read the concluding paragraph. And from there, you can already come up with the main idea. Now, what you need to remember is there are 2 types of main ideas. We've got a general main idea. The general main idea is 1 sentence is the main idea, 1 sentence, a general idea of the whole text, written in 1 sentence. And we find that one in the thesis statement, because the thesis statement holds the general topic and the general purpose. The thesis statement is always the last sentence in the introductory paragraph. So the last sentence of the introductory paragraph is the thesis statement that holds the general topic and purpose, which equals general main idea. Awesome. Now, what about the sub main idea? Now, those are the topic sentences. The first sentence of each body paragraph is called a topic sentence. Now, the topic sentence holds the subtopic and the subpurpose, which equals sub-main idea. Very good. So if you want to know the main idea of one particular body paragraph, then you would have to go to the topic sentence. Exactly. If you would want to know the general main idea of the whole text, where do you look? Thesis statement. Right. Where do you find the thesis statement? Introductory paragraph. Awesome. Okay, and that is now exactly what you're going to do. You are going to skim the text. Now, maybe we can do it together. Yeah? So for starters, so we're really practicing this one. Yeah? Okay, let's start. Frank McCourt, well, actually the first paragraph you already read. No, we didn't. We start now. Frank McCourt sat on a stage in New York City's Lincoln Center, his white hair glistening under the lights overhead. He was still boyish of expression at 66, and smile lines radiated from hazel eyes bright with inquisitiveness. Soon he would be addressing the 1997 graduating class of Stuyvesant High School, where he had taught English for 18 years. He let his mind wander as he gazed out at the great hall. "Yo, teach," a voice boomed. "Ireland," McCourt replied. With more than 10 years of teaching experience under his belt, this kind of interrogation no longer surprised him. "I tell them the truth, they'll feel superior to me," McCourt taunted. But McCourt's heart whispered another possibility. Maybe these kids are yearning for a way of figuring out this new teacher. "Come on, tell us." Skip, 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 skip. "How'd you get to be a teacher then?" they asked. McCourt wasn't surprised that this story fascinated his students. A born storyteller, McCourt drew from a repertoire of accounts about his youth. Since humor had been the McCourt's weapon against life's miseries in Limerick, he used to describe those days. The students roared with laughter. He realized that his honesty was helping forge a link with kids who normally regarded teachers as adversaries. While at college, a creative writing professor had asked him to describe an object from his childhood. "Not," McCourt said, recalling at the thought. While teaching, McCourt wrote occasionally articles for newspapers and magazines. The bell rang in the faculty lounge at Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan. While you're doing this, you should underline and circle keywords, yeah? Why am I asking this? Because you need to become a good observer of detail if you're going to write well. Student after student revealed families fragmented by divorce and loneliness. That night, McCourt lay awake in bed, harvesting the bounty of his chronic insomnia. Yet when he later picked up a notebook and tried to set down the previous night's travels, he stopped. At least the bits and pieces that bubbled into his consciousness and livened the stories he told the class. Okay. On Fridays, the students read their compositions aloud. McCourt was past 50 and painfully aware of the passage of time. These young people have been giving you lessons in courage, he thought. It was October 1994. Frank McCourt, now retired, sat down and read his book's new opening. He stared at the logs glowing in the fireplace and could almost hear students' voices from years past, some angry, some defeated, others confused and seeking guidance. Then Frank McCourt, author, heard the steadying tones of Frank McCourt. "Teacher, of course you do." He scribbled a few lines. "I'm in a playground in Class and Avenue in Brooklyn with my brother Malachi." In September 1996, Angela's ashes hit bookstores. McCourt laid his hands on the lectern, finishing his commencement address at Lincoln Center. "So when you go forth tonight, fellow students, for I'm still one of you, remember that you know nothing. As he gave them a crooked smile, the students leaped to their feet, waving and whistling. This is too much, he thought, startled by the intensity of their response. Their standing ovation continued long after Frank McCourt, the teacher, who had learned his own lesson slowly but well, returned to his seat. I really need Kacamata Plus. Sometimes I don't see the words. Okay, guys, that's the idea of the skimming exactly. So read the introductory paragraph, every first sentence ends the concluding paragraph, and while you're doing that, you annotate the keywords. Very good. Okay, we're going to listen to the story and read along.
The Education of Frank McCourt by Barbara Sanday Dimmitt from Reader's Digest. Frank McCourt sat on a stage in New York City's Lincoln Center, his white hair glistening under the lights overhead. He was still boyish of expression at 66, and smile lines radiated from hazel eyes bright with inquisitiveness. Soon, he would be addressing the 1997 graduating class of Stuyvesant High School, where he had taught English for 18 years. He let his mind wander as he gazed out at the great hall. I've learned so much from kids like these, he thought. They gave me much more than I gave them. Yo, teach! A voice boomed. Frank McCourt scanned the adolescents in his classroom. It was the fall of 1970, and his first week of teaching at Seward Park High School, which sat in the midst of dilapidated tenement buildings on Manhattan's Lower East Side. McCourt located the speaker and nodded. You talk funny, the student said. Where are you from? Ireland, McCourt replied. With more than 10 years of teaching experience under his belt, this kind of interrogation no longer surprised him. But one question in particular still made him squirm. Where'd you go to high school? Someone else asked. If I tell them the truth, they'll feel superior to me, McCourt thought. They'll throw it in my face. Most of all, he feared an accusation he'd heard before from himself. You come from nothing, so you are nothing. But McCourt's heart whispered another possibility. Maybe these kids are yearning for a way of figuring out this new teacher. Am I willing to risk being humiliated in the classroom to find out? Come on, tell us. Where'd you go to high school? I never did, McCourt replied. Did you get thrown out? I was right, the teacher thought. They're curious. McCourt explained he'd left school after the 8th grade to take a job. How'd you get to be a teacher then, they asked. When I came to America, he began, I dreamed bigger dreams. I loved reading and writing, and teaching was the most exalted profession I could imagine. I was unloading sides of beef down on the docks when I decided enough was enough. By then, I'd done a lot of reading on my own, so I persuaded New York University to enroll me. McCourt wasn't surprised that this story fascinated his students. Theirs wasn't the kind of poverty McCourt had known. They had electricity and food. But he recognized the telltale signs of need in some of his students' threadbare clothes, and sensed the bitter shame and hopelessness he knew all too well. If recounting his own experiences would jolt these kids out of their defeatism so he could teach them something, that's what he would do. A born storyteller, McCourt drew from a repertoire of accounts about his youth. His students would listen, spellbound by the gritty details, drawn by something more powerful than curiosity. He'd look from face to face, recognizing a bit of himself in each sober gaze. Since humor had been the McCourt's weapon against life's miseries in Limerick, he used it to describe those days. Dinner usually was bread and tea, he told the students. Ma'am used to say, we've got our balanced diet, a solid and a liquid. What more could we want? The students roared with laughter. He realized that his honesty was helping forge a link with kids who normally regarded teachers as adversaries. At the same time, the more he talked about his past, the better he understood how it affected him. While at college, a creative writing professor had asked him to describe an object from his childhood. McCourt chose the decrepit bed he and his brothers had shared. He wrote of their being scratched by the stiff stuffing protruding from the mattress, and of ending up jumbled together in the sagging center with fleas leaping all over their bodies. The professor gave McCourt an A and asked him to read the essay to the class. "No," McCourt said, recoiling at the thought. But for the first time, he began to see his sordid childhood, with all the miseries, betrayals, and longings that tormented him still, as a worthy topic. Maybe that's what I was born to put on the page, he thought. While teaching, McCourt wrote occasional articles for newspapers and magazines. But his major effort, a memoir of 150 pages that he churned out in 1966, remained unfinished. Now he leafed through his students' transcribed essays. They lacked polish, but somehow they worked in a way his writing didn't. I'm trying to teach these kids to write, he thought, yet I haven't found the secret myself. The bell rang in the faculty lounge at Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan. When McCourt began teaching at the prestigious public high school in 1972, he joked that he'd finally made it to paradise. Some 13,000 students sought admission each year, competing for approximately 700 vacancies. Part of the fun of working with these bright students was keeping them a few degrees off balance. McCourt asked at the beginning of a creative writing class, "What did you have for dinner last night?" "Come on, tell us. Where'd you go to high school?" The students stared at him as if he'd lost his wits. Why am I asking this? Because you need to become good observers of detail if you're going to write well. As answers trickled in, McCourt countered with more questions. Where did you eat? Who else was there? Who cleaned up afterward? Student after student revealed families fragmented by divorce and loneliness. We always argue at the table. We don't eat together. As he listened, McCourt mentally cataloged the differences and similarities between his early life and theirs. He began to appreciate more the companionship that enriched the meager meals his mother had struggled to put on the table. That night, McCourt lay awake in bed, harvesting the bounty of his chronic insomnia. He visualized himself standing on a street in Limerick and took an imaginary walk about. He looked at shops and pubs, noting their names, and peered through their windows. He read street signs and recognized people walking past. Oblivious to time, he wandered the Limerick of his mind, collecting the details of scenery and a cast for the book that festered inside him. Yet, when he later picked up a notebook and tried to set down the previous night's travels, he stopped. McCourt knew that he was still holding back. Before, he had done it out of respect for his mother, who would have been mortified to see the darkest and most searing episodes of his childhood in print. But she had died in 1981, and with her had died his excuse. At least the bits and pieces that bubbled into his consciousness enlivened the stories he told in class. Everyone has a story to tell, he said. Write about what you know with conviction, from the heart. Dig deep, he urged. Find your own voice and dance your own dance. On Fridays, the students read their compositions aloud. To draw them out, McCourt would read excerpts from his duffel bag full of notebooks. "You had such an interesting childhood, Mr. McCourt," they said. "Why don't you write a book?" They threw his own words back at him. "It sounds like there's more to that story. Dig deeper." McCourt was past 50 and painfully aware of the passage of time. But despite his growing frustration at his unfinished book, he never tired of his students' work. These young people have been giving you lessons in courage, he thought. When will you dare as mightily as they? It was October 1994. Frank McCourt, now retired, sat down and read his book's new opening, which he had written a few days before and still found satisfying. But many blank pages lay before him. What if I never get it right, he wondered grimly. He stared at the logs glowing in the fireplace and could almost hear students' voices from years past, some angry, some defeated, others confused and seeking guidance. "It's no good, Mr. McCourt. I don't have what it takes." Then Frank McCourt, author, heard the steadying tones of Frank McCourt, teacher. "Of course you do. Dig deeper. Find your own voice and dance your own dance." He scribbled a few lines. I'm in a playground on Classen Avenue in Brooklyn with my brother Malachi. He's 2. I'm 3. We're on the seesaw. In the innocent voice of an unprotected child who could neither comprehend nor control the world around him, Frank McCourt told his tale of poverty and abandonment. In September 1996, Angela's Ashes hit bookstores. Within weeks, McCourt received an excited call from his agent. His book was getting warm reviews and selling at an unbelievable rate. The most surprising call came on April 7, 1997, when McCourt learned that Angela's Ashes had received America's most coveted literary award, the Pulitzer Prize. McCourt laid his hands on the lectern, finishing his commencement address at Lincoln Center. Early in my teaching days, the kids asked me the meaning of a poem, he said. I replied, I don't know any more than you do. I have ideas. What are your ideas? I realized then that we're all in the same boat. What does anybody know? So when you go forth tonight, fellow students, for I'm still one of you, remember that you know nothing. Be excited that your whole life is before you for learning. As he gave them a crooked smile, the students leapt to their feet, waving and whistling. This is too much, he thought, startled by the intensity of their response. During months of speeches and book signings, he had received many accolades. But this left him fighting back tears. It's the culmination of everything coming from them. Their standing ovation continued long after Frank McCourt, the teacher who had learned his own lessons slowly but well, returned to his seat.
Okay, a very long but beautiful text. And basically, if I were to ask you right now, this is an article, but more written in a story. It's story-like, so it's also written about someone's life. This is written by Barbara, so not written by Frank McCourt. So this could be a biographical narrative. This is what we could call a biographical narrative. So someone wrote about his life, but wrote about his life in a story form, in a story style, not just informative. Biographical narrative. Yes. Okay, that brings us to the main ideas. Look again at the preview on page 38. How did your answers to the questions help you understand the story? Now, as you can see, previewing and skimming is very important, especially for texts that are this long, because otherwise it's so hard for you to follow. And by doing the previewing and skimming, you already have the right focus, and then it's very easy to grasp all the main points and pick up all the main points that you're hearing. Okay, since this is biographical, it does talk about, in a part, about this man's life, and therefore we have a chronological order, which we can also refer to as a timeline. So here you have the timeline with information from vocabulary on pages 36 and 37 and reading 1. So we go from 1934 all the way to 1997, and I'd like you to fill that out. Come up with the main points, sub-main ideas or main points to fill in what happens in the time in that particular year. For example, in 1934, Frank McCourt's family returned to Ireland. 1949, Frank McCourt returned to the United States. Now, what happens in 1970, 1981, 1994, 1996, and 1997? Pause your video to answer that. It's only one sentence. Go ahead. Great, that brings us to the part of details. After we've done the previewing and the main idea comprehension, finding the sub-main ideas and main points in a timeline of the text, now we're going to look at the details. So we still have the timeline here going. You're going to fill it out, add details to each part. Like the first one, 1934, as we said that Frank McCourt's family returned to Ireland, right? That was the main point, and I'd like you to put some of the details next to it. So you have the main points already, the sub-main ideas or the main points already, and I want you to add the details that help develop that main point. You can pause your video to do that. Remember, scan your text, look at keywords. Awesome. Make inferences, inferring the meaning of idioms and expressions from context. So when we're making inferences, we're basically making an educated guess. We're looking to the underlying meaning, not only to what is written there, but we're reading between the lines. We're using the facts in order to come up with a conclusion. And okay, so an inference is an educated guess about meaning. Readers can often infer the meaning of idioms and expressions from the context of a story. By closely reading the information in the sentence where the idiom or expression is used, as well as reading the sentence before and the sentence after that sentence, readers can often determine the meaning of an idiom or expression. And that also is the same for words that you don't know. If there is a particular word that you don't know, a particular keyword or an expression or an idiom, read the text before it, read the text after it in order to figure out what it means. You can also predict from there, and that is focusing on context. Now look at the example and read the explanation. What does the idiom in bold mean? Paragraph 4. With more than 10 years of teaching experience under his belt, this kind of interrogation no longer surprised him. Under his belt. Do you really think that experience is literally under his belt? No, of course not. There's nothing under his belt. That is just an expression. Now, in this sentence, we read that McCord has more than 10 years of teaching experience. We also read that the students' questions do not surprise him. So we can infer or we can conclude that McCord's teaching experience makes him feel strong enough to face his students. We can guess that the meaning of the idiom is already achieved or already experienced. So not literally under his belt. So idioms and expressions cannot literally be translated. Okay, you need to look at the underlying meaning. Read between the lines. Now, what I want you to do is read the following idioms and expressions in context. In context. So you're not only going to look at this idiom or expression and then straight away answer. No, you got to go back to the paragraph as it is referred here, and then read the paragraph in order to be able to read between the lines. So refer to the paragraphs in the parentheses, like it is stated here, paragraph 5. Use context clues, so the text before it and the text after it, to determine the meaning. Now write a synonym or a definition of the idiom or the expression. Yeah, I want you to write that here. So write a synonym or definition of the idiom or expression. What does it mean? Throw in my face, forge a link, turn out, leave through, lost his wits, harvesting the bounty. Number 6, we go on with 7. Bubbled into his consciousness, dig deep, dance your own dance, and in the same boat. Okay, you can pause your video to figure out what is synonym for this idiom or expression or the definition of it. Go ahead. Okay, that brings us to the last part of reading 1, which is expressing opinion, where you are going to reason, give your opinion, give reasons for your opinion, and even as possible, give a result of how do you think what it might result into, or how your opinion affects yourself or the people around you, or has an effect. Okay, first one. Frank McCord had many obstacles in his life. What do you think was Frank McCord's greatest obstacle, and how did he overcome that? Number 2, how did Frank McCord's student give him the courage he had been lacking to overcome his obstacles? Okay, please write down your opinion. Also write down the reasons why you have that opinion, and maybe you can even write down what it might result in, or how did that affect Frank or the people around him, or how does your opinion even have a result or can have an effect on people. Awesome, really good. So let us give a quick revision before we end this session. Yes, going back to page 35. Okay, we went over the vocabulary real quick. We looked at the words and the definition of the words, finding also a synonym for the word and phrases, and looking at how the words and phrases were used within the context of a small or short text. Then we went over the reading skills, previewing and skimming, and we know the previewing is that we look at the title and the subheadings and the visuals to figure out what the type of text is and what the purpose of the text is. It also gives us focus. And skimming is when we are looking at trying to get the main idea, the general main idea, which we, through skimming, which is reading the introductory paragraph, every topic sentence, and the concluding paragraph. And from there we can find the general main idea, which is also stated in the thesis statement, which is the last statement in the first, which is called introductory paragraph. And every topic sentence, which is the first sentence of each body paragraph, is also a sub-main idea, which holds the subtopic and the purpose. Great. Now, so we skimmed through the text, and then we filled out the timeline, figuring out what the sub-main ideas and main points were in the correct order, because this text, though it looks like an article, it was actually a biographical narrative, because someone else, in this case Barbara Sunday Dimmitt, wrote about Frank McCourt's life. So it's a biography, but because it was written in a story style, it becomes a biographical narrative. And with any narrative, so and biography, we always have chronological order. It is always a timeline of 1 year following the next year, the next year, the next year. It never goes down, but it always advances in time. And so we try to come up with the sub-main ideas and the main points, putting them in the correct place of year of the timeline. And after that, adding the details that belong to those main points, again, in the correct place in the timeline. For inferences, we looked at the meaning of idioms and expressions that we can get from context. That is when you're not looking at a literal meaning. Authors often use expressions and idioms to just bring deeper meaning. Deeper meaning to the message that they're going to get across. And those expressions and idioms you cannot translate literally. It will be weird. But you gotta read between the lines to understand what they're actually saying, so the implied meaning of it. And so we figured those ones out at the end, and we had a point of reasoning where we had to state our opinion, reasons for our opinion, and the third step is where you also think about how your opinion and the reasons for your opinion can have a result or affect other people or have an effect on you or your environment. Awesome job. Well done. We'll see each other very soon. Again, God bless you and take care.